right, off to a good start. You guys just wish you could hear our conversation the last 20 minutes. Greg Everett, Ursula Garza, Weightlifting Life Podcast. Almost forgot the name of it for a second there, but I recovered. This is episode 17. I know that doesn't sound like a big number to most people. Like, as far as numbers go, it's the 17th smallest. But, man, it's been a while. Okay.
17.
What?
I really feel like it's 18.
Are
Oh,
you
no.
sure?
It's
Of course you're wrong. It's
I'm just
17.
going to Instagram.
I'm going to keep track of this shit. Okay. Well, we do have some questions here, but we're going to start off talking about an issue that's apparently very near and dear to both of our hearts and minds and souls and whatever else gets pissed off about this. Our humors, as they might have said long ago. Ursula, you know what? You just jump off into this one.
Okay.
I'm going to sit back and laugh and then join in.
We had a little bit of a conversation as we were starting. I've had, and I'm sure people have experienced this, where they've had a new athlete that comes in, has had like 2 or 3 different coaches. You may not know their coaches, you may know their coaches. And they come in and express this, like dissatisfaction about how basically that coach has not really helped them, and they're not really at their potential, they're not meeting the potential. They just don't feel, or they didn't have a good relationship with that coach.
Well, let's be clear too, 2 or 3 coaches in a relatively short period of time, not like 10 years.
Right. That's what I was about to say. Yeah, because sometimes you move coaches because you move locations or you move levels, and there's a particular coach that is better with one level than the other. Like, I don't usually work with many youth, and I've said that before, but you get a coach who comes in, and immediately it's about how they have, and it may not even be that they've changed coaches. It could be that they've just changed sports a lot. One of my kids right now is, and I call him a kid, he's a man, is doing the CrossFit Open, and it's driving me mad because he had just dedicated to weightlifting. Right.
Apparently
so
not.
They're like multi-sport athletes, or that so then you have to make an assessment, like, is the reason that this person moving around coaches or sports because they get unsettled, or they don't let the process go long enough to work. But there's something to me that throws up a red flag when I see an athlete that's jumped a lot of sports or jumped a lot of coaches in a short period of time. Not that they're not worth spending time with necessarily, but the chances of them either switching to another sport again or changing coaches again is probably pretty high. And you want to make sure that you properly vet them. That's a Trump word now. That you properly vet them. He's infiltrating everything.
You do know he didn't create that word, right?
No, I do know that.
Okay.
Yes. He's just used it more than any human on earth.
I just want to make that clear to everybody listening.
Yes, it was in the dictionary prior to him. But, you want to make sure that you ask these kind of questions. Like, a lot of times you get an athlete and you say, what's your background? And they just start telling you what they've been lifting. But if they come to you and are telling you about all of these coaches that they've been under, especially if they're a bunch of big name coaches, they're like, oh, I've turned, I get that sometimes where they're like dropping names. And then you're thinking to yourself, well, those are all good coaches. What are you doing with me? And then they start telling you, how great you are. And you're just like, yeah, but those were good coaches too. I mean, it seems unlikely that they just didn't work out without you being part of the component problem.
Yeah, they've done such a good job with all these athletes for many years, but they just couldn't do a good job with you. Yeah, that is a red flag.
And we're not talking about this to talk about the athletes per se. This is really information for coaches. Because Greg was like, well, what's your slant, Ursula? Like, why do you want to talk about this? And for me, talking about it is more of us directing this to, not to athletes, but to coaches. And to athletes in that, this is how you are perceived.
Well,
if you can't give any one coach the amount of time needed. Now, if you're moving states, or if you're changing cities. I mean, it's probably smart for you to change coaches and find a coach on the ground. But we're talking about, people who have a multitude of remote coaches. And here's the deal. Like, if you just want to take their money, if you're a remote coach, and move on, the one thing for me is that when I get a new athlete, I invest a lot of time in them. And do I want to invest a lot of time and effort into and attention away from other athletes to give to this one, just to have them leave in 6 months or a year because that's their pattern,
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it's more of just a warning.
Well, I mean, even though
for me, it's a red flag if I get an athlete like that. And also, you're bringing someone new into the environment. And if they've been at multiple places, you may want to check to see what the environment was like when they left. Like, did they create some kind of an issue with the coach? Was it, detectable in the training environment? I mean, these are things. And it has always been common practice in weightlifting amongst the old kind of generation of weightlifting coaches that if someone switched teams or someone switched coaches, we would contact each other and have a conversation, because you want that other coach's information, opinion, blessing to go ahead and take on their athlete. And that, in terms of our sports culture, has been lost. And it's a shame, because it was that information was what helped you know whether you were making the right decision to have this athlete in your environment, potentially impacting all your lifters. Now, the other thing you can do is have, a recreational only group and say, okay, there's going to be lots of turnover in that group. But we're specifically talking about people who are looking to compete and want to become part of a team. They want to be in that team environment. But in every other team environment, they've caused some sort of drama. You may want to pay attention to that. Because you think you're going to be the next great thing and you're immune to that is probably a mistake.
That virtually never works. It's just like when you break up with something, it's not you, it's me. No, it is you, it's not me. If that's happened 5 times in 3 years, it is 100% the athlete, not the coaches, not the gyms, not the teams. There are certain people who expect, a coach to be some kind of magician and to basically create a champion out of them without their having to actually put in the same amount of effort. And, ultimately... Or
they may just not be talented. Like, you can put all the effort into somebody and do your best job and get them to their absolute potential, and they never get on a medal stand. They may never get to nationals. Like this expectation that I think I'm good or I want to be... Hey, I love the confidence. I love the confidence of somebody who thinks they're good or plans to be as good as they can be. But... if you don't have the genetic potential, or you started really late and or you've been doing a bunch of other sports and you've got a bunch of fucked up movement patterns, like Greg said, no weightlifting coach is a magician. I mean, you can make some technical changes and get some good results out of them on the front end. You can get them stronger and get some results. But to expect, to create a champion out of every single person, there is no coach that can do that without the material. You have to have good genetic organism.
Can't make a racehorse out of a jackass.
Can't make chicken shit. You can't make chicken salad out of chicken shit. That was John's.
That's true, but that's vulgar. I don't use that kind of language. Even let's take someone who does have the physical potential to be a great weightlifter. You're still going to run into people who just absolutely, it's due to their character that they will run into these kind of things where they're bouncing gyms, they're bouncing coach to coach. And it is because they have expectations that they have to be the absolute number one priority. Yeah, they're jealous of the coach giving attention to other lifters. They think that, anytime their training doesn't go perfectly, it's because the coach has done something wrong. Like in a competition, if you've got a big team and you're coaching 2 athletes in one session, they throw a fit about it because you're not 100% focused on them. So in those cases, it's 100% self-sabotage on the part of the athlete, where they have the potential to do well or to do far better, to even be very good, but they're not allowing themselves to do well. They're not allowing the coach to do their job. They're not allowing the team to kind of assist in, supporting that effort and all those things. And so to me, that's much worse. It's one thing if someone doesn't have any physical talent and they just listen to their moms too much, telling them that they could do anything they wanted, which is total bullshit. I mean, you want to pump your kids up, but you also got to be reasonable and rational. And, a healthy dose of reasonable pessimism goes a long way in this world. We've kind of forgotten that. The limit is far below the sky for most of you. Let's just get that straight. And so that to me, that's the biggest issue. Is I would rather have someone who works really, really hard, who will be totally dedicated, who will be a good teammate, who will do anything I ask them to do as a coach, and who will still not be that great because they don't have the talent. I would much rather have a gym full of them than physically talented people who are whiny, who blame everybody else for them not doing well, who, create all kinds of problems with everybody else. I can't stand it. And that to me is the biggest red flag.
Works off of somebody's, one person's emotions. I can't stand that shit.
Oh yeah, there are some people who can put a dark cloud over an entire gym.
Yeah,
you'll see that everything's going fine, and this one person will walk in, and the mood in the gym instantly changes. I mean, it's like a switch goes off.
Like it might be great, and they have a shitty day. When they have a shitty day, they just make it shitty for everybody.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Exactly. Rather than just stuffing their feelings deep down inside where no one can see them exactly where they belong, and being a part of the team and helping everybody else. But yeah, so that, the other thing too is in this day and age of social media, it's pretty easy to do a background check on these people who come to you. If you're not going to talk to the previous coach, which I wholeheartedly recommend, they may not have 100% perfect perspective on the situation, but usually they're going to be able to give you some good insight. They'll give you the dirt. You can at least get the story from them instead of directly from the lifter, because the lifter's not going to tell you the truth.
Yeah, you might want to get both sides.
Yeah. And then figure out, what seems most realistic to you. But look at their freaking social media. If you go on to someone's social media account and you see over and over and over and over again things that you don't want in your gym, don't bring that athlete into your gym. And I mean, this can be all kinds of things. It can just be the way they talk about other people, the way they present themselves, anything. It's up to you. It's your team. It's your gym. You can kick anyone out that you want. You can let anyone in that you want. But just be aware of how that affects you as a coach and everyone else. And the thing too is you got to remember is if you're a newer coach and you're really trying to build your name and build your reputation, every single one of your athletes, their what they do in public, how they behave, what they say, all reflects on you to at least some extent. And so if you have a gym full of like snotty, whiny shits who are causing problems with everybody in the universe because it's all their fault and they're perfect and everyone's ruining their weightlifting career for them, you probably don't want to be associated with that, because right or wrong, people are going to assume that you're either fostering that or encouraging it or just allowing it. So be cautious.
Mm-hmm. Well, and don't be afraid. Like if you see those red flags, don't be, for newer coaches, sometimes they're just so desperate to build a team or have athletes. And I understand, like you have to, you have to practice coaching. And so, sometimes it's just that you take everybody who comes, but don't be afraid to be selective. Like when you have to think about your own health as well.
Yeah.
Like some people that we're talking about, these types of athletes, I mean, they will drain.
They'll take years off your life.
Soul.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if you find yourself outside of the gym or, falling asleep at night, worrying about the bullshit that you're having to deal with a person, any person, they probably shouldn't be in your life. Like
cut them loose. Beat it.
If they're affecting you that much, that it is creating stress for you. I mean, I have kids that come to the gym and they have little fits, and I just shut them down.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's the other thing,
just shut
too.
them down. And that's the thing. Like, if they're controlling the environment more than you are,
that's a problem.
that's your fault too.
Yeah.
Like, you got to do something about it.
Well, and with new people too, I mean, you don't necessarily, if you're concerned, you don't necessarily have to not allow them in, but you can allow them in with conditions, or you can allow them in, knowing privately, like, hey, this person is potentially going to be awful. So I need to keep a close eye on them. These are the things I'm going to not allow. And the moment any of that stuff comes up, I'm going to squash it, and I'm going to pull them aside and say, look, you can't do A, B, and C. The next time you do this, you're gone. And make it really simple. You don't owe this person anything other than being straightforward with them. That's totally fair. I can think of one lifter that I took on a couple years ago, whose previous coach warned me and said, basically, I was about to kick this lifter out of the gym. Here's the problems. The other lifters complain, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, okay, well, I'm going to give this person a shot. And I did, and everything was totally fine, has been fine the whole time. So in that case, it turned out to be not that lifter necessarily, but maybe
and it could
he
have
didn't
just been their
jive
personality
with that. Exactly. So, sometimes you can, if you're on the fence, give the lifter a chance. And, like I said, like Ursula said, and like I just said, you need to set boundaries, be very clear and be straightforward about them. Don't have a bunch of secret rules that they get in trouble for breaking because you won't tell them what they are. Be forward about it, and, give them one chance to fix it. And if they can't pull it off, then get rid of them.
Yeah. I mean, I've set some people down and just said, if this continues, you're not going to be able to keep training here. It's not personal. It's, I think.
But it's going to get personal.
Well, the thing is that everybody will. For me, I've never asked someone to leave because of something personal. I have either left someplace or asked someone to leave in terms of coaching there because I didn't feel like I could do a good job in that environment, because sometimes coaches move environments for the same purposes. Like it's not working. That doesn't mean that, that gym, the people are awful or you're awful as a coach because you're going somewhere else. It's just that you have to find some place where you can control the environment, and it's a good one. And that means having some measure of, and it doesn't mean everybody's going to love everybody in the gym. Not everybody has to be the same personality. I mean, that would be boring. I go into my gym every night and they crack me up, We have a good time. Last night I did yell at the top of my lungs, shut the fuck up. When I mean at the top of my lungs, but pretty loudly. And I mean, you're setting the rules. Like if somebody's taking a moderately heavy lift or they just look like they're having a hard time, I will shut people up so that person can focus, right? I mean, that's your job. If this person is like, oh my God, I can't stand them because they're always talking, well, you need to tell them to shut up. I mean, if that person is right, like every time I try to focus, they're yipper-yappering, well, you as the coach are responsible for that environment. So that may not be the person. They may just not know what the etiquette is. And whenever you're letting in new people or people new to the sport, they don't know the etiquette. I mean, it starts with, I'm sure you've encountered this first day. Don't walk across the platform when someone's lifting. Like, don't walk in front of them. We just don't do it. I know that in CrossFit, no one gives a shit. They'll walk 6 inches in front of somebody snatching, whatever. In weightlifting, in weightlifting, that is not acceptable. Now, if they're doing the bar or really lightweight, you can look at them and usually they'll nod at you or tell you, to go ahead with a little head nod or something. Fine. But just as a general rule, so you're starting from the very beginning, teaching people the etiquette. But if you do a good job of that as a coach, you shouldn't run into those types of problems. So I don't know. I just wanted to talk about particularly seeing athletes that either jump sports a lot. So, they come to you and you're like the third sport in 3 years that they're doing. Fine, if you want to coach them, maybe weightlifting is going to be the one that keeps them in. But what that shows to me is they just they have a lack of commitment. And I think that's what we're talking about, athletes, that how much time do you want to commit to someone who isn't committed?
Yeah.
Now, if you're just doing it for, $1, it doesn't matter. Put them in personal training and ramp it up, whatever.
Yeah.
But
it's the kind of volume approach. If like you're doing online coaching and you just want 1,000 people at $20 a month and you don't give one shit about any of them, that's fine. Doesn't matter who they are. That's all online anyway. But if you have a gym, it's much different because you do actually have to control the atmosphere and the environment. You have to focus more on quality than quantity.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay, we said we weren't going to talk about that very long, and we did.
I blame you. Okay.
Always.
Let's get on to our actual question here from Edwin. How can you generate more power/speed out of the hole?
Is this Edwin really Edward Baker? I call him Edwin. No, he would
probably. He better not be asking that question.
Yeah, right.
Well, so presumably Edwin here is talking about how you can basically get out of the bottom of a clean faster and more easily. So there are a number of ways to kind of work on this, but number one is get stronger. So your clean is easier relative to your squat. And then the other thing too is that I think a lot of people kind of forget is, being able to catch the bounce. In other words, to transition in the bottom of a clean or a front squat and, really take advantage of that stretch shortening reflex in your muscles, the whip of the bar, that kind of thing. It's a skill. It's a neurological thing. It takes practice. It's an issue of timing. It's an issue of learning kind of when and how you need, tension and where. And so if you're not doing front squats and trying to basically kind of mimic the tempo of a clean, and you're not trying to accelerate out of the bottom of your cleans as much as possible, then you're never going to be really good at this. And cleans are going to be really hard because you're going to be grinding through them the whole time. So with squat stuff, I tell people, anytime you front squat, you're going to be practicing the balance and accelerating up as fast as possible, unless you have a very specific and compelling reason not to. You may be doing pause front squats because you need to work on, upper back strength or, just general postural strength and control and position. But that's going to be a relatively small portion of your overall front squat and squat training.
It's interesting how I feel like there was at some point some sort of pause squat revolution where, right? I mean,
there's like Ursula, you got to understand.
7 or 8 years ago, like all of a sudden everybody was doing pause and everything. And I think there are reasons to do pauses. So say somebody's working on their jerk, like doing a pause in the dip to try to find the depth, holding overhead in the snatch for a few seconds to get your balance and to learn where, to feel where your balance is. But in a clean, I just don't, like I'll see somebody catch it and stop, and I tell them that movement does not end until you're standing up.
Yeah.
Like a clean is not like a snatch where you snatch into the hole and you can stay there and then stand up separately. Like the pull into the front squat has to be all one continuous motion.
No, if you're stopping in the bottom of a clean, it better be because something has gone terribly wrong, and that's your only option. That's your only option to save it.
And then you better do like 2 rebounds, one ugly one and one straight.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No,
I just feel like, am I right with the pause squat thing? Am I right?
I don't know. I like pause squats, but typically, again, it's to address. Like they just took over. It's to address a certain
that
thing.
Didn't even know how to clean. Like people that didn't even know how to clean are doing pause squats.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Why don't you learn to rebound and then do a pause squat?
Well,
I
because
just feel like
that's hard.
Shut up. That's hard.
Well, no, it's like everything else on the internet, Ursula. This shouldn't surprise you. People get a hold of one little concept, and they get a huge erection over it, and they can't let it go, and they want to apply it to everything and pretend it's some brand new thing.
Oh, but they're applying it to, like, okay, some things, but not everything needs a fucking pause. I'm not saying you can't do pause front squats. I'm just saying I've never done them. Because, I mean, I'm working on rebounding and then getting strength at the transition point.
Yeah.
So if anything, I'm doing something like a front squat recovery or back squat recovery, or what Dan John calls them something. I don't know what kind of squats he calls them. Dead stop front squats. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, like a bottom up squat or a pin squat.
Yeah, a pin squat where you. We just call them front squat recoveries because it's like all the rest of the movements that you recover from. You find the angle that you're weak at, and you go a little bit below that, and then you have to grind through that.
Yeah, from a dead stop. Yeah.
From a dead stop,
yeah.
But it's at a point that would be right past where your rebound dies out. Like that's where you need to kick in and have power. Like the rebound is learning how to use the stretch reflex, like Greg said. And I mean, I teach from the very beginning squat hops, just so that people feel, the elasticity in the muscle.
Yeah.
And that they're not bringing their hips up too high when they do that, because I've seen tons of people doing like basically double rebounding front squats, but they bring their hips up so high that they go back down and just smash the shit out of their knee. You're like, no, that should be real low. It's like, a real low bounce on a basketball.
Yeah.
And I think that is something that is not necessarily inherent for someone who has never done a full squat. You have to teach a rebound.
Oh,
so if you didn't learn the fundamentals in terms of how to rebound and then have good pull mechanics so that the bar actually lands on you and you reverse the momentum, and in that reversal it's straight up, not forward or back, then you're just lacking in fundamentals. Like, to start worrying about that now, after you should have already learned that.
Okay. Well, yeah, of course. It's like I taught a college course, a writing workshop at Chico State. And these were freshmen who were, some of them were like borderline illiterate. It's like, yes, you should have learned this already, but in case you didn't, we better go over it now. So yeah, you can say that, yes, you should have learned that on day one, but in a lot of cases that people didn't. And they're coming from, things like CrossFit or powerlifting or, kind of general strength training where there is no bounce. They don't even squat all the way down, so you can't bounce. Yes, you can get a little bit of a stretch shortening reflex, but it's pretty minimal because the speed has to be so controlled. And so doing things like 1 1/4 front squats, but rather than doing that at a controlled speed, you're actually bouncing twice. So basically you'd go to the bottom, bounce about 1/4 of the way up, back down, bounce, and then come up. And then you're basically practicing that rebound a couple times per rep, getting that rhythm, feeling that, that timing. But then I think too, part of it is developing that mindset, that aggression of recovering out of a squat. Like, you have got to stand up as fast as you possibly can. And I've only known 2 coaches who've used this exercise, and I've used it here and there. I really like it. I just don't use it a lot because I find I have to do other stuff that takes up time. But you and Bob Morris are the 2 who I've seen use a clean jerk rather than clean and jerk, which I
got that from Angel Spassoff.
Well, there you go.
My coach that just passed away.
Yeah. Great exercise because it forces you to time the clean properly and come out of the bottom and come out, foot full on the gas and fly out of the hole. And so it's great because you also get someone so focused on the jerk. I forgot how to talk for a second there. Did you hear that? You get someone so focused on the jerk that they quit overthinking the clean, and it tends to almost smooth it out and get that timing better. Because they're so focused on, holy shit, I've got to drive out of the bottom of this squat faster than I've ever driven out before. And so, but that's another thing. One reason I do like pause squats occasionally is to force someone to just, mash on the gas pedal right from the start, rather than kind of like, oh, I'll take my time, and the bottom it's kind of harder, and then I'll speed up.
My point is that the person who does pause squats should already know how to rebound.
Oh no, 100%. You don't start a lifter off with pause squats unless they have serious mobility or postural control issues. That's different, but for a beginning lifter, a pause squat would be a remedial exercise, not a training exercise. You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
Okay, so we're in agreement. You need to learn how to clean properly, which means that, like Ursula said, that the pull, the turnover, the receipt, and the recovery from the squat is all one continuous motion. And the recovery from the squat is immediate and as aggressive as possible. So that's first and foremost. That everything else will be kind of secondary to that. But then when you're training your squats, always maximal acceleration up. We're not doing fucking Charles Poliquin tempo squats here. We're not looking for time under tension. We're looking for, maximal rate of force development in this case. But then exercises you can do that I would say would help, besides doing cleans and squats properly, would be doing, jumps, either weighted or unweighted, from the bottom of a squat. And so I call them back squat jumps. There's a number of different names for them, but all you're doing is a back squat, and then you bounce out of the bottom.
You're going to nail yourself in the face.
Yeah, you don't want to do that. You're going to squat to the bottom just like you would, catch the bounce, rebound, and then jump as high as you can right away. So you're basically forcing yourself to use that or time the transition as quickly as possible, use that bounce and accelerate maximally. And these are usually going to be like 20-25% of your best back squat or so. They're not very light, or they're not very heavy. And it's all about speed and like literally trying to jump as high as possible. I like to mess around and try to, like, at the top of the jump, touch the soles of my shoes together to make sure I'm high enough. Also, I get bored training in the garage by myself sometimes.
Yeah, I'll say.
And then, pretty much any kind of jumping exercise.
Squat ballet.
Yeah, pretty much any kind of squatting exercise or jumping exercise from a squat position. Even a pause where you just are accelerating as much as possible, because that's not only training the physical characteristics for that acceleration, but again, that mindset of learning how to just turn it on like you're flipping a switch rather than gradually accelerating. Anything else you can think of for that?
No, I put in like cleans for the power position, cleans for the blocks. Those exercises that you can just focus on the top of the pull or the second pull, pulling under and coming right out.
Yeah. Yes. And clean jerks.
That's really
not that we should have to say that again, but try clean jerks. There is, of course, a demo video on catalystathletics.com in case you've never heard of that exercise library we have, which would be crazy to me at this point. All right. Tara asks, I have a really hard time power snatching opposed to snatching. I would have written that the opposite way. I think
that's
she means,
why I wasn't sure.
Yeah, I had to read it a few times.
When I read the rest of the question, it seemed like it should say I have a really hard time snatching as opposed to power snatching.
Yeah, so when it gets heavy, I start to muscle it up instead of getting under it. Any drills to focus on pulling under. So we believe what Tara is asking or is saying is that when she's trying to snatch, as the weight gets heavier, she ends up power snatching instead of snatching. So don't worry, Tara, we got you. We're two reasonably intelligent people. We can figure this out. But this is...
I got it all wrong. She's like rolling her eyes right now.
And now she's just like, shut the fuck up and tell me what to do.
I'm just going to resend it with another name.
This is a super common problem, especially with people coming from CrossFit, because so much of what they do is power stuff. They spend so little time in that overhead, deep squat receiving
and then
position.
when they do snatch, sometimes it's just a cut pull. Like they don't really.
Right.
Those are one of the things that you constantly see and have to spend time fixing.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna say really quickly, all of these things are pointing to me to a lack of like working on fundamental portions, like just the fundamentals of lifting.
Of course.
And so the problem we get that happens is that we're getting adults that are already athletic, that have already been doing sports, that already know how to power snatch, and then they're bringing over what they know instead of just doing what you say.
Right.
And every time I do a clinic, I'm like, I have them do like a muscle snatch, and they bend their knees. I'm like, don't bend your knees. I have them do another muscle snatch. They bend their knees again. Don't bend your knees. It's like they're just patterned already to show you what they know.
Right.
And if they would just stop, slow down, and do what you're telling them, you can rebuild the whole lift.
Yeah.
But what you're running into is somebody, if every time you get to a heavy power snatch or snatch, you end up muscling it, well, you haven't spent enough time working on the basics of snatching, and you really should go back and relearn how to snatch. That's my final advice.
Yeah, but
I'll let you go ahead and go through all the other stuff.
Well, I think in the context of CrossFit, the recommendation that I've given about 1 billion times in the last 10 plus years is that when you are new to lifting and new to CrossFit, you need to separate those two things initially. You need to have a period of time when you are learning how to snatch and clean and jerk in isolation, not in some like vomit-inducing, colon prolapsing workout where you have to do 400 snatches when you don't even know how to snatch properly. Because then you're basically just compressing, a huge amount of neurological patterning, all this, skill learning into these small periods of time, which means you accumulate a huge amount and it's all wrong. And then, so for every rep that you do that way, you're making it harder and harder and harder to learn how to do it properly. If on the other hand, you learn in isolation how to snatch and clean and jerk properly, you can take that skill later into a metabolic workout and they're going to be fine. You can even modify those lifts in some respects to make them more suitable for the way you want to perform them in a conditioning workout.
Yeah, so you're intentionally doing muscle snatches or intentionally power snatching.
But the going the opposite direction doesn't work, and it's the most frustrating thing on earth for people in my position, Ursula's position, because it's teaching someone who has zero experience is so much easier than trying to teach someone who has all this terrible experience.
All day long, I'll take somebody who's never snatched.
Oh yeah, 100%. It's great. You're like, holy shit, this is so easy.
Yeah.
And of course, they're not arguing with you about what they should do because they saw it
and their
on
body's
YouTube
not
or
arguing with you, That's what you feel like. You feel like I'm having an argument with your brain right now, like just your brain and your body.
I like you fine, but your body's a fucking asshole.
Your neuromuscular system is fucking me up.
Yeah. So that would be number one, is even if you've already gone down that road a ways where you learned the snatch and clean and jerk, in CrossFit, and like a lot of times people will literally learn how to snatch the first day they get a workout that has a bunch of snatches in a conditioning workout, and the coach just says, jump the bar up overhead. That is how they learn, and then that's how they practice. It shouldn't be any surprise that they then find it really difficult later down the road to snatch well. It's surprising, honestly, that they can do anything at all. So even if you've gone down that road a while, I would take a step back, stop doing any kind of barbell Olympic lift, bless you. Stop doing any kind of barbell Olympic lift in conditioning workouts. Put that stuff off to the side, consider it skill work. And then, if you want to do a workout with some kind of Olympic lift type movement, do some kind of variation. Do dumbbell, do sandbag, do fucking medicine ball. I don't care. But don't do the barbell lifts for a while in a conditioning workout until you can get those things dialed in and more consistent and proficient. And then you're going to find that a lot of things magically clear themselves up and you don't blow your fucking back and shoulder out every 3 weeks.
So do you want to give her exercises to get better at pulling under?
Yes.
No.
Yes. No, Tara, you just have to stop doing barbell Olympic lifts in CrossFit for 2 years and then get back to us. No, let's do that. Go ahead. I'll add the ones you don't list.
I don't want to say the one I'm going to say.
Oh, God damn it. Okay. So tall snatches, number one. That's literally just standing in a tall position and then lifting your feet and pulling under into as deep of a squat as you can.
And some people call those pull-unders, snatch pull-unders.
Also dead hang snatches. All wrong. It's called a tall snatch. Any snatch from like a really high hang or high block position, like mid thigh or higher. And so you have extremely little, time and distance to get the bar moving up. So you're really forced to move under it. Also like a snatch from a power position or a dip snatch, same kind of thing.
I would do some combo work. Like I would do snatch balance and then immediately come to your hip and do a snatch from the hip where you're working on dropping under. What do you think, Greg? Because I'm not the biggest fan of doing like what y'all call a drop snatch, just keeping the bar in the same spot and then dropping straight down.
We don't drop, Ursula. We punch under the goddamn bar.
Whatever. But I see a lot of people like dive, like they drop their chest.
Well, that's because they're doing it wrong.
Snatch balance in those, you got to really be careful that people don't see it as like a dive.
Right.
That's why
it's
I
not
like
a low bar overhead squat.
Balance. But I see people using like that drop snatch with no dip and drive as like it's the same as a snatch balance, and it's really quite far down the road, I think, like that you need that type of speed. Like first you just need to learn how to catch a moving object or receive a moving object.
Thank you.
And you need to develop comfort and stability in the hole. And so those two things come first before like speed. Now, if you've already done those, what's her name? Edwin? Tara.
Her name is not Edwin.
Edwin, yeah.
Edwina?
If you've already done those things, make sure that, you have a good snatch balance. I mean, first of all, if you don't have a snatch balance that's at least, well, and I've seen people who couldn't do this, but you should be able to do 100% of your snatch in a snatch balance. If you don't have that, like if your power snatch is higher than your snatch balance, you've found part of the problem.
Yeah.
Besides maybe, what Greg and I rant about skipping fundamentals. But I mean, that's your first point of action. If your snatch balance is not your same as your power snatch or your full snatch, then there's a problem. If your power snatch is heavier than your full snatch, that's a glaring issue.
Yeah, you're not allowed to do any more power snatches until you fix this problem. But yeah,
and I'm a fan of power snatches. I just think that
I hate them.
A missed snatch, a missed power snatch should be a snatch. It happened to me the other day. I missed a power snatch with 65, and it just ended up being a pretty good full snatch.
Yeah.
So.
Full-on squat snatch. But yeah.
Yes.
So the fundamentals, and I was gonna lump those in as kind of confidence exercises too. Starting with overhead squats. That's your absolute basic, snatch receiving position exercise to develop strength, mobility, stability, security, confidence, all that stuff.
But you see in CrossFitters that they can do like overhead squats with a shit ton, but then they can't. Their snatch balance is like
right. That's what I'm saying. Is that's your starting point. Yeah, because not all of them can do that.
Some people take that. Yeah, that's true. But I see some people that they just do this ridiculous, and they do some fucked up, weird, behind the neck, wide grip, pseudo split jerk, and then they do a hybrid snatch push press jerky thing, and then they overhead squat it. It's like, if I can't identify what you did to get it overhead, you shouldn't be doing it.
Well, I don't give a shit how they get it overhead, especially women, because they're going to be less strong upper body. But the thing is a lot of them will go narrow grip.
Yeah,
but it's step by step here, Ursula. For fuck's sake, let me just spell out the sequence before you have a fucking heart attack.
I don't like it.
I don't give a shit what you like.
I agree, but I'm just saying people get stuck on the overhead squat. They never move.
Holy shit! Let me just finish what I'm saying, and then you won't fucking object to it so much, you spaz. So you start with the overhead squat. Because yes, there are some CrossFitters who can overhead squat absurd amounts of weight and can't snatch dick. I concede that point. We're moving fucking on from that. Okay. Because lots of them cannot overhead squat a bar, which is part of why they power snatch instead of snatch, which you already said a minute ago. So shut up for a second.
Ursula too.
Oh my God. It's a good thing we're not doing this in person. I'd be like pulling your hair to get your face away from the microphone. Just kidding. I wouldn't do that. Just so we're clear, I don't get any fucking hate mail over that. God damn it. Take a joke. So you get your overhead squat, but make sure that overhead squat has to be with the same grip you use for your snatch, because that's another problem I see with CrossFitters is they do overhead squats in order to go heavy, in order to do more reps without hurting their wrists. They go to a much narrower grip. Well, guess what? If all you do is a narrow grip overhead squat, your overhead squat with a snatch grip's not going to feel the same. It's going to be harder and less stable. Once you have a good base, if you can't overhead squat as much as you snatch or more than you snatch, then you still need to work on overhead squats. If you got to that point, then it's time to move on to snatch balances, Ursula. Fuck. Because yeah, as Ursula said, you should be able to snatch balance as much as you snatch if the snatch balance is an exercise you do regularly. If you do it once every 3 months, you will not snatch balance as much as you snatch. That's just silly. I have never snatched balance as much as I snatched. For years, I couldn't overhead squat as much as I snatched, but it's because I was pretty good at snatching, and I never did overhead squats or snatch balances because I never had a problem holding a bar overhead.
Right.
So you have to take that into consideration. Don't expect to just do 10 kilos over your snatch in the snatch balance the first 2 times you do snatch balances. It's going to be a process of building that stuff up. Okay, is that all okay with you, or do you want to cry about it some more?
So far I'm 3-0. I mean, I agree. I just see so many people, and you're like, Greg won, see, she agrees. I just see so many people coming out of CrossFit that they overhead squat a shit ton, and like how they get the bar up there is all fucked up. So they can't even do a snatch balance with like a portion of what they snatch, like a percentage of what they snatch. And then they're doing these really, really heavy overhead squats. And I mean, that's fine if you're using it just for CrossFit's sake. But if you're looking for it to transition into weightlifting, the way you get the bar overhead should mimic the movement more closely. So I teach, and I'm sure you do too, but essentially a snatch balance, but catching it like in a quarter squat and then working on sitting down. Yeah, well, with the snatch grip. Say snatch power jerk.
Yeah, it's a snatch power jerk. Don't try to overcomplicate it. Snatch grip, power jerk behind the neck. So many unnecessary
words. Power
words.
Snatch balance or power drop snatch. And then you catch, and we practice catching.
I call it Mighty Morphin Power fucking Snatch.
That's right.
Jesus Christ, just fucking say what it is.
You catch it quarter squat and then catch it half squat and work on meeting the bar. And then you can, add the overhead squat for a few reps after that. I'm just really specific on how I teach someone how to receive the bar from the beginning.
Oh, absolutely.
And I don't let them overhead squat, getting it up any other way, because it doesn't apply to weightlifting.
But see, that's
so
the
I
thing.
don't let you do a split jerk behind the neck with
That's
snatch
fine
grip.
if you're starting with someone fresh, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about someone who's been doing this a while and has to fix the problem.
Yeah.
Right? It's a totally different process.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I go back in and reteach.
Well, yeah, you have to. But so even according to the process I just outlined, these people who you're freaking out about having huge overhead squats, yeah, they're done with the overhead squat stage. So there's no reason to freak out about it. Now they're on to snatch balances. So it fits right in with what you're talking about anyway.
I know.
So Greg 4 million, Ursula 3. The thing is you don't even know that you agree with me because I can't get the words out for you to hear what I'm saying.
Greg, are you not getting our dynamic? Like, if it's obvious that I agree with you, nobody likes it.
You know what's funny is there's been like a couple negative reviews of this pod. Well, actually, really, like 2. I guess that is a couple. There's been a couple negative reviews, but it's funny. There's been a couple more than that, or like emails and shit. But it's funny because it's always the same thing, but it goes both ways. So one will be like, I like it, but Ursula interrupts Greg all the time. But then the next one will be like, oh, I like it, but Greg interrupts Ursula all the time. It's like, well, it can't be fucking both. So maybe you're just listening wrong. Fuck.
Well, I
don't know why we even bother doing this.
Pro Greg.
Huh?
I said there's one pro Ursula and one pro Greg.
Well, actually, there's a lot more pro Gregs, but I just wasn't going to say it until you brought that up.
You go ahead.
All right.
Care?
I don't care.
Do you have more time?
I don't have feelings. I don't give a shit. Yeah, we got more time. This will be a quick one.
As if there ever was a quick one.
Yeah, well, whatever. We'll make it a quick one. Patrick asks, I was asked by one of my athletes, why do we not train both the snatch and clean and jerk on the same day or in the same training session? This was my exact response. Because 80 to 90% of the time during a training session, you are working on technique and skill. The other 10 to 20%, you are working on heavy lifts. You don't train them together because they are two completely different movements and should be focused on individually so you can make the current body connection without muscle confusion. That was a weird sentence. Am I correct? Am I completely off my gourd? How would you approach this question? I agree with you in part, Patrick. I don't agree necessarily with your percentage split there, but that's not really the important part. So I would say that generally speaking, I do like to separate snatch, clean, and jerk movements as much as possible. Like, so for example, we might have a workout that's some kind of snatch exercise, some kind of snatch pull exercise, maybe an overhead, snatch related exercise, something like that, where we are training the skill of those same basic patterns together, because that does reinforce and help someone learn that. And so that's more important the newer you are to the sport. The longer you've been lifting, the less that really matters, because that stuff is ingrained and it's not that big of a deal. I'd say the other part of it though is that training fatigue is pretty specific to movement patterns. So if you are constantly mixing everything every single day, you're going to be tired for everything more the next day, or a couple days after, than you would be if you kind of did all or mostly snatch stuff one day, all or mostly jerk stuff the next day, all or mostly clean stuff the next day. So in other words, in that sense, you're able to get more done because that subsequent fatigue is more specific to a movement, and then you're doing a different movement in subsequent sessions. But having said all that, especially if you're I guess really only if you're going to be a competitive lifter or are a competitive lifter, I think it is very important to snatch and clean and jerk on the same day, somewhat regularly. Obviously, more and more important the closer you get to a competition, because it's very difficult to clean and jerk heavy after you've snatched heavy. And if you don't work on that, as a skill in and of itself, working on kind of the mental elements of that, as, being able to stay focused and aggressive after having a tough, bunch of snatches, and being able to go into the clean and jerk just as enthusiastic and just as aggressive as you were on the snatches, and then physically being conditioned to do that, you have to train that. And that's where you look at a lot of my programs and a lot of other coaches' programs. I know, Mike Bergner, John Thrush, Kyle Pierce, a lot of coaches, Saturdays tend to be snatch and clean and jerk heavy singles, or some kind of format similar to that, so that you are training the two competition lifts together on a pretty regular basis. Ursula, what say you to this?
Well, I think I differ a little bit, because I tend to, for my competitive lifters, we tend to do some portion of each lift every day. But if I'm gonna clean heavy, if we're gonna clean or do a lot of cleans, and then maybe front squats and pulls, then I might not have a pull movement for the snatch, right? Because the pull's going to get tired, legs are going to get tired from just the cleans, and so I don't want to. Or we'll have a light power snatch in front of that. But I tend to, with beginners, work on like categories, not necessarily like having it all lift related. So like I'll work on pull mechanics, and I usually start with snatch. So there are a lot of workouts for beginners that are all snatches, and then we start working on jerks. And then usually the pull mechanics from the snatch is pretty easy to turn them over. If you've already worked, front squats and teaching them how to rebound, and then you've taught them how to jerk, then you can start putting the clean and jerk together later. But I tend to work categories where I work I do balance work, I do pulling under work, I do pull mechanics work. And it is true that at the beginning it tends to mostly be snatch or clean and jerk related on separate days. But once they get past that initial stage, I like to try to do some type of work for each lift in every training program, just because even if I'm not doing a snatch, there are aspects of the snatch that I might be able to work on, and to try to get as much practice. And my guys only train 4 days a week, so we don't have those multiple sessions where you can do like just snatch and just clean and jerk and just squats and separate workouts, or
you just kind of trailed off there. I guess you're done.
Yeah. Did we cut off?
Did we cut off?
No. Okay. No, I thought the phone hung up. I had to lift my cover.
The phone definitely didn't hang up, because you can still hear me.
No, I know, but I didn't know if this.
Am I still breathing? I can't tell. Am I still breathing?
But
Am
anyways,
I choking?
I tend to work different categories with beginners. So we start with like snatch mechanics, overhead stuff for snatch, and then jerk, and then I'll bring in clean later, because usually by the time, if I've done my job well with snatch, clean becomes really, really easy. But I don't mix. I mean, I don't separate them out probably as much as Greg does for competitive lifters. We tend to do some exercise to benefit each movement. And that's not necessarily snatching and clean and jerking together, but some snatch related movement, some clean and jerk related movement once I have someone that's preparing for higher level competition.
All right. Well, I have absolutely nothing else to say. We did it.
You didn't answer if he's completely off his gourd.
I told him already right at the beginning he's not completely off his gourd. I said I agreed with him. Mostly.
Oh,
It's
so are we gonna do Zachary's?
Nah. Zachary's gonna have to wait. We don't have time for Zachary. It's over. We're done. Stick a fork in us. What?
That's a good question. Zach's question, I think, is a good question.
Okay, good. Then you can be excited for it next time.
I'm super excited about Zachary's question next time.
Oh, me too. I'm so excited about doing more of these.
You're such an ass.
That's the two highlights of my month.
You know, the problem really is just getting the time. And then I drive Greg nuts because I do shit like, he's like, will this time work? And I'm like, I said, just pick a time. He picks a time. I'll just post it. It's fine.
No, you know what? That's not the issue.
I aggravate
the
Greg.
Issue is giving me a time and then not being there at that time.
It's not this cute little emoji.
I very much value punctuality, as does every reasonable, rational adult in the history of the universe. What
do they always say? It doesn't take any talent to be on time.
That's right. But apparently it does, because you're missing that fucking talent.
It was 8 minutes today, and my dog didn't want to come inside because it was a beautiful day.
Oh, God, I have 2 dogs, too, and other stuff. You don't get to make those excuses.
You like that? You don't even have a real job.
But my life is so much harder.
Yeah, my life is
You don't know what this is like. Oh, God damn it. You sound like one of the athletes we were talking about at the beginning of the show.
Punch Greg in the nuts next time I see him.
Oh, my God.
Bird shot. No, Greg put, he's like, can we do Friday? I'm like, yeah. I said Friday or Saturday. Pick a time, and I've said pick a time and I'll work around it. And he said, how about 11:30? I put, I can't. I was just messing with him. It's all testy.
Actually, no, I didn't even respond
to that. If Greg ever quits, it's going to be my fault. But at least it was my fault that he started.
Yeah, this whole thing is your fault. That is true.
It is my fault. Everybody thanks me.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to hear your lovely voice.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right.
Okay. I really do love you, Ursula. Don't worry. Don't worry, everybody. We really do like each other. Even though sometimes I just fucking can't stand her.
He wants to choke me, but he's not alone. That's okay.
I don't want to. I'm a lover, not a fighter. But I'm also a fighter, so don't get any fucking ideas. How's that for a reference to Eastbound and Down? Okay.
All right.
Let's get the fuck off this thing. Jesus. Now we're just rambling incoherently for no apparent reason. We're not teaching anybody anything.
No, that's useless.
All right, guys. We'll see you next time. Go away for 2 weeks. Bye now.